नमस्कार। प्रोफेसर डॉक्टर हरिप्रसाद पालीवाल, कर्नल एचपी पालीवाल, हम में से अधिकांश लोग जो यहाँ बैठे हुए हैं, मैं स्वयं भी उन्हीं में से एक हूँ। हमने इनको जैसे देखा 2006 में इन्होंने ज्वाइन किया, करीब 17 साल ये यहाँ रहे। बीच में 2-3 महीने का कोई समय था जिस समय किसी कार्य से नहीं थे, अदरवाइज 17 साल ये यहाँ रहे। जब ज्वाइन किया था तब भी सर ऐसे ही दिखते थे, और अब भी मैंने तो जब भी 2-4-6 महीने पहले उनको देखा था तब भी ऐसे ही दिखते थे। मृदुभाषी, हर व्यक्ति का दिल जीत लेने वाले। क्लिनिकल नोट्स भी जब लिखते थे तो इतनी डिटेल्ड तरीके से लिखते थे, उनका एक प्रॉपर सिस्टम था। बोलते थे तो एक अनुशासित अदब तरीके से, स्लोली, बहुत अच्छे तरीके से। लेकिन विधि के विधान के आगे हम सभी लोगों को केवल नतमस्तक होना पड़ता है। हम उस विधान को बदल नहीं पाते। और 14 जून 2023 को आदरणीय एचपी पालीवाल साहब का देहांत हो गया। अब ये तो पता नहीं कि इसके बाद कौन सा लोग होता है, क्या होता है, लेकिन वो जहां भी उनकी पुण्य आत्मा रहेगी, जहां भी वो रहेंगे, ईश्वर उन पे अपनी कृपा रखे, जो संचालक है इस पूरी सृष्टि का, इस जगत का। आज इस अवसर पे हम ईश्वर से उनकी आत्मा की शांति के लिए और उनके परिवार को ईश्वर साहस प्रदान करे कि वो इस दुख को सहन कर सकें। 2 मिनट का अपनी अपनी जगह यही बैठे हुए मौन करते हैं। अपनी अपनी जगह बैठे हुए 2 मिनट के लिए we'll observe silence and pray God. ओम। ओम तत्सत।
A very good morning everybody. I am Dr. Mansi Setia, second year resident from General Medicine. The topic for today's CCR is a 17-year-old male with recurrent vomiting and hiccups. Chief complaints. Mr. R, a 17-year-old male, 12th standard student, resident of Bharatpur, came to emergency department with the complaints of recurrent hiccups which were there for 2 months and recurrent vomiting associated with nausea for 2 months. History of present illness. Patient was asymptomatic around 2 months back, after which he developed vomiting which was there 10 to 12 episodes per day and hiccups 6 to 7 per minute. He was hospitalized outside for the same. Upper GI endoscopy was done which showed antral gastritis and small hiatus hernia. He got relief with treatment, was discharged after 4 days. He took treatment for 10 days overall, remained asymptomatic for around a month and developed hiccups first and then vomiting later now. Hiccups. The frequency was 6 to 8 per minute. They were continuous throughout the day and night, not aggravated by the meals, and they weren't relieved by water or physical maneuvers or medication. They were affecting daily activities of eating, drinking and sleep. Vomiting. There were 15 to 20 episodes per day. It was non-bilious, projectile in nature, contained undigested food particles. It was non-blood tinged, associated with nausea. There was no relation to food timing and it was not relieved by medications. Negative history. There was no history of fever, loose stools, abdominal pain, heartburn or dysphagia, constipation or obstipation, jaundice, reflux or regurgitation, headache, vertigo, and drugs and substance abuse. Past history. There was no history of hypertension, diabetes, tuberculosis, or medications or any surgical history in the past. Treatment history. Patient was treated 2 months ago with pantoprazole, baclofen, ondansetron, which he stopped after 10 days. After which he was asymptomatic for around a month. There was no history of any other medications. Family history. It was not significant as per our case. Patient had history of non-consanguineous marriage of parents. The mother, father and siblings were healthy. Personal history. He was non-alcoholic, non-smoker, non-tobacco chewer. Sleep was adequate before he developed hiccups. He was vegetarian and bowel and bladder habits were normal. The vitals at presentation were normal. The general physical examination including pallor, icterus, clubbing, cyanosis, lymphadenopathy and edema were absent. The external auditory canal and head and neck examination were normal. The oral cavity was healthy. The systemic examination including respiratory system, cardiovascular system, gastrointestinal system and central nervous system were normal. Summary. The patient presented with complaints of recurrent vomiting and hiccups for a few days with similar history around 2 months back with normal systemic examination. What could be the causes of illness? I'd like to ask the audience, what could be the causes of illness?
It may be gastric or non-gastric cause. Gastric including enteral gastritis, lactic aciditis, or esophagitis, or hypersomnia. Non-gastric causes including renal includes CKA or hyponatremia.
Anybody else?
There can be infections, normal acute gastroenteritis or even CNS infections can cause vomiting. There can be uremia, other causes like diabetic ketoacidosis if the patient would be a type 1 diabetic.
I think you should have a better way of answering such questions. You have to classify things. You just can't jump from diabetes to CNS infections. You divide the causes, whether it's infective, whether it's non-infective, and similarly. So I think you must you answer the question again, but answer it in a more systematic.
Basically, firstly we'll think about the simple things like gastric problems. Firstly, gastritis. There can be hepatitis, there can be pancreatitis, cholelithiasis and cholecystitis can cause vomiting, peptic ulcer diseases can cause vomiting. Then we can come to dyselectrolytemia and metabolic causes. Hypernatremia can cause vomiting, uremia can cause...
We are not talking about just vomiting, we are talking about vomiting and hiccups. So that narrows down our possible diagnosis on the basis of history, and she has also mentioned the physical examination. So now stick to things which are, you don't enumerate the entire thing only for vomiting. He has vomiting and he has hiccups which are present during sleep. Notice that? And it is projectile vomiting. So you are restricting your diagnosis to a small group. Now divide it into the classification, then what? Otherwise it becomes a full.
There can be a better way also. You divide into portions. One is the peripheral cause, another is the central. In the peripheral cause, you come again with infection, gastritis, and all those things which are under the diaphragm or diaphragm, something like that. In the central causes, you can go with the CNS. There can be this way also. Peripheral causes of recurrent vomiting and hiccups, and central causes of recurrent vomiting.
Alright, the possible causes of nausea, vomiting and hiccups together combined can be gastrointestinal causes, endocrine and metabolic causes, CNS and psychiatric causes, infections, drugs and miscellaneous. Now based upon the history, Following things are ruled out, like Crohn's disease and irritable bowel syndrome from the gastrointestinal causes, alcohol from the endocrine and metabolic causes, and various infections, drugs, and the miscellaneous causes were ruled out, and the leftover causes were considered for further evaluation. After initial assessment in ED, patient was started on proton pump inhibitors, antiemetics, IV fluids, and GABA agonists, and investigations were requested. All the sent investigations were within normal limits. I'd like everybody to just have a look. So there was no relief in symptoms on day 3. Outside upper GI endoscopy, which was done 2 months back, showed antral gastritis and small hiatus hernia. Patient was treated, but patient only had temporary relief and developed the same complaints again. ENT opinion was taken, which showed normal examination. Psychiatry opinion was taken to rule out psychiatric causes of vomiting, as our young patient was a student and his board exams were approaching. Possibility of anxiety disorder was kept. Benzodiazepines and selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors were started. Patient developed new symptoms on day 4. Oral ulcers in oral cavity, which were multiple on buccal mucosa. They were non-bleeding, non-discharging, and painful. He also had difficulty in having meals and water, which probably could be because of burning sensation in mouth. There was drooling of saliva without any neurological weakness. Hence, Ryle's tube was inserted. What could be the differentials now? After the onset of these new symptoms, I'd like to ask everybody. For the medical gastroenterology part, I'd like to invite Dr. Urvashi Gupta.
Good morning everyone, I am Dr. Urvashi Gupta, SR Medical Gastroenterology. So a 17 years old male who presented with us with nausea, with recurrent vomiting and persistent hiccups lasting for more than 48 hours. We considered the following GI differentials, the most common being gastroesophageal reflux disease, hiatal hernia, peptic ulcer disease. Functional causes such as functional dyspepsia, functional vomiting were also considered. After ruling out the mechanical causes such as obstruction of gastric outlet obstruction, small bowel obstruction, motility disorders such as gastroparesis, and other causes such as infections, inflammatory causes, drugs, toxins, and metabolic causes. Based on the history and laboratory findings, functional causes and other causes such as infections, drugs, toxins, and metabolic causes were ruled out. So based on our differentials, the points against gastroesophageal reflux disease were there was no associated chest pain or upper abdominal pain or regurgitation, no associated dysphagia or relation to meals or posture, there was no history of smoking or alcohol consumption. Points against gastritis were no abdominal pain or abdominal discomfort, no relation to meals, no routine use of aspirin or NSAIDs or other drugs, no history of smoking or alcohol consumption. Points against peptic ulcer disease were there was no epigastric pain or bloating, no relation to meals, no drug history, no warning signs such as upper GI bleeding, weight loss or dysphagia, no history of smoking or alcohol consumption. Points against gastric outlet obstruction, since there was only recurrent vomiting associated with nausea, but there was no relation to meals and no history of early satiety, bloating or epigastric fullness. Points against gastroparesis were there were nausea and recurrent vomiting, but there was no abdominal pain, postprandial fullness or bloating, no history of diabetes or recent surgery. Esophageal motility disorders were also considered due to vomiting, but points against were no dysphagia to solids or liquids, no chest pain or upper abdominal pain. So in this case, what investigations would you like to do?
Hello? What? What causes hiccups? Hiccups होते क्यों हैं?
Sir, hiccups are because of the spasmodic contraction of the diaphragm and intercostal muscles. Sir, these are involuntary and functional causes are also there, which can lead to hiccups.
What is the nerve supply?
So nerve supply, sir, there is an efferent limb which includes a vagus nerve, phrenic nerve and sympathetic nerve. And so there is efferent limb. Efferent limb involves phrenic nerve and accessory nerves to the intercostal muscles.
What is the origin of phrenic nerve? Origin of phrenic nerve. Roots. कहाँ से आती है phrenic nerve? It will help you in diagnosis. They help you in diagnosis. That's what I'm saying.
So phrenic nerve nuclei is in brain stem. So
Are you
medial
sure?
not sure.
C4, C3, mainly C4, and it is contributed from C3 and C4. Okay? और क्या क्या सिम्टम हो सकते हैं फ्रैंक नर्व का इरिटेशन हो? Any gynecologist or surgeon who is doing laparoscopy referred pain because of the diaphragmatic irritation. तो phrenic nerve always have shoulder pain. हम लोग जब लेप्रोस्कोपी करते हैं थोड़ी सी एयर रह जाती है, ठीक है, डायफ्राम के अंदर। जब कोई एक्टोपिक प्रेगनेंसी बाद ब्लड रह जाता है, which irritates diaphragm, and then because of the phrenic nerve it is referred to the shoulder. ठीक है? हम लोगों में ये कहते हैं हिचकी आ रही है, कोई याद तो नहीं कर रहा है, साइकोलॉजिकल नहीं, तो आपका प्यारा आदमी है जो आपको याद कर रहा है, वो भी एक कप साथ है, that will not be the cause of the anyway, but I wanted to emphasize it is the phrenic nerve C3 C4 mainly C4 contributions from C3 C4. ठीक है?
Okay, so in this patient, yes.
X-ray and FTA, flat plate
Okay. Any other investigation? Okay.
Dr. Rupashi, before you move on, why would you not want to repeat an upper GI endoscopy here? A 2-month-old negative endoscopy doesn't mean fresh problems haven't appeared.
So we have repeated,
ulcers,
sir.
so among the investigations to be done,
Yes, sir.
apart from ruling out mechanical causes like what has been pointed out by the
Yes, sir. It will be shown in our.
endoscopy should be repeated.
Sir, we have repeated the endoscopy. Yes. So we requested for X-ray of the abdomen, which showed no air fluid levels or dilated goggle loops. Hence, mechanical obstruction causes were ruled out. We also requested for ultrasound of the abdomen, which showed normal study. Hence, inflammatory causes, retroperitoneal or intraperitoneal causes were ruled out. Then upper GI endoscopy was repeated to look for any mucosal lesions or inflammatory causes or any mechanical obstruction. It showed small hiatus hernia with mild gastritis. This also ruled out gastric outlet obstruction and mucosal lesions. Then we asked for CECT of chest and whole abdomen as there were no localizing signs which showed normal study. Therefore, intestinal obstruction and other inflammatory pathologies were also ruled out. Barium swallow and gastric emptying radionuclide scanning were ordered, but investigations could not be done as the patient had excessive urge for vomiting and continuous hiccups. Therefore, we made the diagnosis based on our endoscopy findings as mild pangastritis with small hiatus hernia. Gastroparesis and other motility disorders could not be ruled out as the patient could not perform the investigations. So these findings did not explain the persisting symptoms of vomiting and persisting hiccups. Hence, further evaluation was requested. I'll ask Dr. Mansi to continue case discussion.
So, despite all the investigations and treatment, patient's condition deteriorated and patient developed excessive bouts of vomiting whenever he tried to take anything orally. The hiccups continued, which were now 15 to 20 per minute. cough with sputum along with drowsiness and blurring of vision. The recurrent vomiting, hiccups and cough led to drop in saturation, which was now 80% on room air. He was supplemented with oxygen by nasal cannula. Chest X-ray was done, which was suggestive of aspiration pneumonia. Patient was electively intubated and was started on broad spectrum antibiotics, and blood, urine, endotracheal tube cultures and other investigations were sent. So what could be the differentials now after the development of these symptoms? Anybody?
So I think now we should think about neurological causes. It could be either posterior circulation stroke or something causing raised intracranial pressure, like intracranial space occupying lesions or some brain tumors can be thought of.
So that is primarily because of the drowsiness.
If the patient is becoming drowsy, he has blurring of vision and so patient is becoming drowsy, he has blurring of vision, his sensorium has decreased. So I think there can be a neurological cause like intracranial space occupying lesion or something else causing raised intracranial pressure. Posterior circulation.
Drowsiness की वजह से भी हो सकता है aspiration pneumonia हो.
Yes sir, also aspiration pneumonia can also.
So the possible differential diagnosis now, we were left with GI disorders, CNS and psychiatric causes and autoimmune disorders, out of which esophagitis, GERD, gastric outlet obstruction were ruled out based upon the investigations which were available. The psychiatric causes were ruled out because we had development of new symptoms, and the autoimmune disorders were ruled out because ANA profile came out to be negative. The leftover causes were considered for further evaluation. Now the possible CNS differentials could be intracranial space occupying lesion, demyelinating disorders like multiple sclerosis and neuromyelitis optica spectrum disorders, and posterior circulation stroke, with aspiration pneumonia probably as a complication of vomiting. Out of the remaining differentials, the points in favor for stroke were there was vomiting and drowsiness. The points against being there was no focal neurological deficit or headache. The points in favor for neuromyelitis optica spectrum disorders were nausea, vomiting and hiccups. The points against being there was no paraparesis, quadriparesis or bladder dysfunction or sensory loss. The points in favor for brain space occupying lesion were the history was of 2 months, vomiting, hiccups and blurring of vision. The points against being there was no focal neurological deficit and no seizure-like activity or headache. The points in favor for multiple sclerosis were hiccups, vomiting and nausea. The points against being there was no ataxia and no focal neurological deficit. So now ophthalmology reference was taken in view of blurring of vision and an MRI brain was requested. Now for the ophthalmology findings, I would like to request Dr. Sophia Chaudhary.
Thank you, Mansi. Good morning, everyone. So, an ophthalmological reference was sent to us by medicine department for this patient. He complained of sudden blurring of vision, for which, before going to the examination, I would like to enlist some causes, the commoner causes for this age particularly. So, central serous retinopathy. It's a spontaneous serous detachment of neurosensory retina in the macular region with or without retinal pigment epithelial detachment. It can be induced by increased cortisol levels due to stress. Optic neuritis. It's an inflammatory and demyelinating disorder of optic nerve causing unilateral or bilateral blurring of vision due to various etiologies, which can be idiopathic or demyelinating diseases are very common cause like multiple sclerosis, neuromyelitis optica, encephalitis, or para-infections like viral infections or bacterial fungal infections, syphilis, TB, AIDS, and also autoimmune causes. It is characterized by impaired colored vision and relative afferent pupillary defect. Eales disease. It's an idiopathic inflammation of peripheral retinal veins characterized by recurrent vitreous hemorrhages. Other causes are non-ischemic central retinal vein occlusion. It's again characterized by mild to moderate visual loss and no relative afferent pupillary defect, with mild venous congestion, tortuosity, and venous sheathing. Hemorrhages can also be found. The fifth cause can be central retinal artery occlusion. These are occlusive disorders of retinal vessels due to thromboembolic phenomena, and they are more common in patients of hypertension and with diseases of cardiovascular system. They present with transient visual loss and retinal arterioles narrowing and milky edema. So on bedside examination of a patient, the visual acuity, as far as we could measure, came out to be finger counting 3 meters in both eyes. The extraocular movements were full in range in all direction of gaze with no pain. Digitally, the intraocular pressures were normal. The pupils were round, regular and briskly reactive. There was no relative afferent pupillary defect. No red D color saturation was also noted. On fundus examination, the glow came out to be normal. The media was clear. The disc margins were well defined with normal cup to disc ratio of 0.2:1. The retinal vessels were normal in caliber and contour, and the foveolar reflex was also present. So after the ophthalmological examination, we could not find out any organic cause for the blurring of vision, and there was no intervention from our side. I would like to call Dr. Rishabh to discuss the case further. Thank you.
Good morning everyone. I am Dr. Rishabh Parak, resident second year from Department of Medicine. So, as the ophthalmology causes were ruled out, so we went for MRI brain to look for the central causes of nausea, vomiting and hiccups, which will be discussed by Dr. Shailesh Gupta from Radio Diagnosis Department.
Good morning to all of you. The MRI brain with contrast and whole spine scanning was requested, and the MRI findings are like this. This is the first of all, these are the T2 weighted images in which we can see there is a focal hyperintensity lesion in the dorsal aspect of left half of medulla, and as compared to normal, there is no focal hyperintensity is seen. Next is T2 flare weighted images. Flare is fluid attenuated inversion recovery images in which we can see there is also hyperintensity lesion in the dorsal aspect of left half of medulla, and as compared to normal, there is no lesion or hyperintensity is seen. Next is diffusion weighted imaging in which we can see the hyperintensity in the dorsal aspect of left half of medulla, and on ADC, that is apparent diffusion coefficient, which shows a subtle hyperintensity which indicates there is a subtle diffusion restriction. And next, these are the T1 fat set images, pre and post contrast images, in which we can see there is no post contrast enhancement is seen. So the MRI findings are there is an altered signal intensity lesion appearing T2 weighted flare hyperintense with subtle diffusion restriction is seen involving dorsal aspect of left half of medulla involving area posterinema. There is no enhancement in pre and post contrast sequences. There is no abnormal signal intensity seen in cervical, dorsal and lumbar spinal cord. So next is the differential diagnosis of T2 hyperintense brainstem lesion. First of all is the subacute infarct or a posterior circulation stroke. Next is the neoplastic, that is glioma. Third is ischemic demyelination, which includes multiple sclerosis, neuromyelitis optica, spectrum disorders, myelin oligodendrocytes, glycoprotein antibody associated disease, and post-infectious like acute disseminated encephalomyelitis and Bickerstaff encephalitis. So the points in favor and points in against in the differential diagnosis. First of all is the possibility is stroke. The points in favor is there is a T2 focal hyperintensity in medulla, and points in favor it doesn't follow any vascular parity, and as the patient is a young age, so the possibility of infarct is less likely. Next is post-infectious, that includes acute demyelinating encephalomyelitis and Bickerstaff encephalitis. Points in favor are T2 focal hyperintensity lesion, and points against is the mostly there is a history of prior vaccination. In our case, there is no history of prior vaccination, and in post-infectious ADEM and Bickerstaff encephalitis, there are multiple lesions which involve basically involve the supratentorial and spine. So the post-infection causes are ruled out. Next is demyelinating disorders, which include multiple sclerosis, neuromyelitis optica, and myelin oligodendrocyte glycoprotein associated disorders. The points in favor are steatofocal. First of all, we discuss the points in favor of multiple sclerosis. There is steatofocal hyperintensity in medulla. Points against is the multiple sclerosis basically occurs in the age of 40 to 45 years, and the age of the patient in our case is 17 years, which is a young boy. And in multiple sclerosis there are multiple lesions which are basically supratentorial, and in our case there is a T2 hyperintensity, and there is also no T2 hyperintensity at callososeptal interface, so the possibility of multiple sclerosis is ruled out. Next is neuromyelitis optica spectrum disorders. Points in favor as T2 focal hyperintensity in medulla. Points against is there is no evidence of optic neuritis, and there is no evidence of any spinal cord lesion. Last is brain space occupying lesion that includes glioma. The points in favor is T2 focal hyperintensity in medulla, and point against is the most common location of gliomas is the midbrain, that is tactile plate. The morphology is not like this, and it is not causing any mass effect, and there is also no pre and post contrast enhancement on T1 fat set images, so the possibility of brain as well or glioma is ruled out. Now I would like to call the Dr. Rishabh to discuss the further case.
Yes, so we are left with the remaining differentials. Among the GI disorders, these were pangastritis, small hiatus hernia, gastroparesis, and motility disorders. Based on the MRI finding, as discussed just now by Dr. Shailesh, intracranial space occupying lesions were ruled out, posterior circulation was ruled out, and multiple sclerosis was ruled out. So, based on the clinical findings of the patient, which was nausea, vomiting, and the recurrent hiccups, and the neurological picture, give us the possibility of area post-traumatic syndrome, which is a variant of neuromyelitis optica spectrum of disorder. And for this, a neurology opinion was taken and certain investigations were requested. Among the investigations, we went for CSF analysis. We went for CSF aquaporin 4 antibody, myelin oligodendrocyte glycoprotein antibody, and oligoclonal bands. So these are the CSF finding reports. In the findings, we have protein, sugar, lactate dehydrogenase, cell count, ADA, appearance, opening pressure, all were within the normal limits. Among the antibody, aquaporin 4 and autoantibody was positive, and remaining two MOG and oligoclonal bands were negative. So this is the diagnostic criteria of neuromyelitis optica spectrum of disorder, and we applied this criteria in our patient. So the first criteria is with aquaporin 4 IgG antibody. This has three things. The first is one or more of the 6 core clinical characters should be present. Second is the positive test for aquaporin 4 IgG antibody. And third, no any alternative diagnosis should be present. So according to our patient, these are the 6 clinical characteristics which are depicted here. The first is optic neuritis. Second is acute myelitis. Third is area post-traumatic syndrome. Fourth is acute brain stem syndrome. This fifth one is symptomatic narcolepsy, and sixth is symptomatic cerebral syndrome. So, based on the criteria, the one or more of the 6 core clinical characteristics. In our case, this third one, area post-traumatic syndrome, was a fit. The second, our already as I told, aquaporin 4 IgG was positive, and no alternative diagnosis was seen. So, this was a perfectly fit in our patient case. This is another criteria which is without aquaporin 4 IgG antibody. Here it requires 2 or more clinical criteria, which I discussed just now. And this is the diagnostic criteria taken from the Neurology Journal, which was published in 2015. So the diagnosis of AQP4 antibody positive neuromyelitis optica spectrum of disorder was confirmed, and this was a case of area post-traumatic syndrome with mild pangastritis with small hiatus hernia. So to discuss more about area post-traumatic syndrome and NMOSD part, I would like to call Dr. Jatin Jain from Neurology Department.
Excuse me, Rishabh, there is another finding on MRI which can be included in the criteria MRI finding. Is it not?
That's part of area post-traumatic syndrome diagnosis. So when you're saying area post-traumatic syndrome, you have covered the MRI finding.
So in the MRI finding, which involved the lateral dorsal aspect of...
So you can include that also in your diagnosis.
Good morning all. I am Dr. Jatin Jain, Senior Resident Neurology. I would cover the neurological aspect of this case. So we received a referral call for a 17-year-old male who presented with recurrent vomiting and hiccups with the MRI suggestive of T2 flare hyperintensity with diffusion restriction in the left dorsal half of the medulla involving the area postrema. I would like to ask about area postrema to the audience. Anybody, what is area postrema?
आप ही बताइए डॉक्टर साहब कौन कौन से रिफ्लेक्स सेंटर्स होते हैं मेडुला ऑब्लिंगेटा पोस्टरम?
सर एक तो रेस्पिरेटरी सेंटर होता है मेडुला ऑब्लिंगेटा में, दूसरा सर एमेटिक सेंटर होता है, हिकअप सेंटर होता है, सर केमो ट्रिगर्ड जोन होता है जो एमएसएस इंड्यूस करता है सर। बेसिकली ऑटोनॉमिक रेगुलेशन भी सर हमारा एरिया पोस्ट्रेमा से होता है बिकॉज मेडुला में ऑटोनॉमिक सेंटर।
व्हाट इज द पोजीशन ऑफ मेडुला ऑब्लिंगेटा इन द ब्रेन?
इट इज नियर द फोरामेन मेरिडियन सर। इट इज इन द ब्रेन स्टेम, लोअर पार्ट ऑफ द ब्रेन स्टेम नियर द फोरामेन मेरिडियन।
उसके ऊपर क्या होता है?
उसके ऊपर पॉन्स होता है।
नीचे क्या होता है?
नीचे सर सर्वाइकल कॉर्ड है।
You can explain because of the area postrema, you can explain hiccups, you can explain vomiting and other symptoms.
So area postrema, it is basically located at the base of the fourth ventricle. It is an emetic reflex center. It lacks tight blood-brain barrier and has large number of aquaporin 4 receptors. It regulates fluid balance, osmoregulation and immunomodulation. What is the role of area postrema? The area postrema via hypothalamic brainstem connections regulates fluid balance, osmoregulation, immunomodulation and also has chemosensitive neurons mediating hiccups. In our case, due to demyelination, there is increase in neuronal firing in the area postrema which is associated with recurrent vomiting and hiccups. So let's talk about the NMOSD. What is NMOSD? It is an immune-mediated demyelination and axonal damage predominantly targeting optic nerves and spinal cord. Isolated area postrema syndrome attacks may be encountered both at onset and during the NMOSD course. It accounts for around 20% of all demyelinating disorders. The prevalence in adults is around 0.37 to 10 per 1 lakh. In India, the prevalence is 2.6 per 1 lakh. The median age of onset for NMOSD disorder is 30 to 41 years, but cases are also described in children and older adults. So what are the sites specific for NMOSD? Basically the circumventricular organs, the organs located around the ventricles are involved, like periependymal surface of the corpus callosum, hypothalamus, area postrema, the central cord, central canal of the spinal cord, the periependymal surface of the lateral ventricles, the periependymal surface of the third ventricle, the optic chiasma and the fourth ventricle. So based on the clinical characteristic, what are the NMOSD meanings? It can be multiple sclerosis or MOG disorder, the myelin oligodendrocyte glycoprotein antibody associated disease. So these are the clinical manifestations that we can see in aquaporin, in the MOG and the multiple sclerosis. In aquaporin, the long segment transverse myelitis greater than three or more than 3 segments of the spinal cord are involved. The optic neuritis, area postrema. These are the clinical characteristics for the aquaporin NMOSD. For MOG, optic neuritis, acute disseminating encephalomyelitis, unilateral cortical encephalitis. For multiple sclerosis, it can be myelitis, optic neuritis, brainstem involvement and the cerebral episodes. So the biomarker for the NMOSD is the aquaporin 4 IgG antibody. For the MOG is the MOG IgG antibody. But for the multiple sclerosis, yet no antibodies are available. We depend on the oligoclonal bands, which are present in greater than 85% of the cases. The course of aquaporin NMOSD is typically relapsing, while for the MOG, it can be monophasic or relapsing. And for multiple sclerosis, it can be relapsing, remitting, primary progressing or secondary progressing. So based on the site specific for the demyelinating disease, for NMOSD spectrum disorder, bilateral optic nerve involvement with optic chiasma is there. For the MOG, basically the retrobulbar part, retrobulbar part and the bilateral optic nerve involvement. For multiple sclerosis is generally the unilateral optic nerve involvement is there. For spinal cord, basically the central cord is involved in the MOG and NMOSD. For multiple sclerosis, there will be patchy involvement of the spinal cord. For the NMOSD in the brain, basically the circumventricular organs are involved. Same for the MOG, but in multiple sclerosis there may be juxtacorticular or periventricular involvement. ब्लरिंग ऑफ विजन सर ऑर्गेनिक कॉज तो कुछ हमें मिला नहीं और पेशेंट का सिर्फ जो ब्लरिंग ऑफ विजन था वो 2 दिन में सर रिकवर भी हो गया था। कोई ऑर्गेनिक कॉज ना ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ द CNS और ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ द ऑफ्थाल्मोलॉजिकल एग्जामिनेशन सर हमें कुछ नहीं मिला था। स्टीरॉइड से पहले ही हो चुका था सर उसको, उसके बाद स्टीरॉइड स्टार्ट। So let's start with the treatment part. For acute attack, there are 3 options available: IV glucocorticoids, IV immunoglobulins, and plasma exchange. So generally the treatment is started with the methylprednisolone IV glucocorticoids 1 gram for 5 days. If the patient doesn't respond, then we go for the IVIG or the plasma exchange. So for the relapse prevention, oral prednisolone, rituximab, azathioprine, other drugs like mycophenolate mofetil, methotrexate, and metoxantrone can be used. The early use of rituximab has been explained in the studies. With the early use of rituximab, we can reduce relapse by around 80%. So I would like to call Dr. Rishabh for the continuation of the treatment part. Thank you.
So patient was started on treatment as per the NMO SD guideline just told by Dr. Jatin. So we started with high dose intravenous methylprednisolone given in a dose of 1 gram in 500 ml/ns for 4 hours for 5 days. After this, we achieved a partial response in vomiting and hiccups. Its frequency decreased, but still the symptom was present. So we went for the second drug, that is intravenous immunoglobulins, which was given in 2 gram per kg in 5 divided doses. After this, we achieved a partial response of in frequency of vomiting and hiccups, which were reduced after starting the therapy, and patient was extubated. No more oxygen was required. Chest physiotherapy and spirometry were initiated for a speedy recovery. But patient still had partial recovery after 5 days of steroid therapy and intravenous immunoglobulins, and was having few episodes of vomiting now also. So to prevent the relapses, as per guidelines just told, injectable rituximab was given, which was given a dose of 1 gram intravenous infusion stat, and which was repeated after 15 days, same dose. After this, MRI brain with whole spine was done to look for spine involvement. As just now we have learned that in NMOSD SD part there is involvement of acute myelitis, which is in LETM form, longitudinal extensive transverse myelitis. But in our case, there was no spine involvement, which makes our case a rare entity. So now the review of literature part. So this is the journal taken from the Egyptian journal.
How is the patient now?
So patient is, we will discuss in the further slides. Sir, this is the journal taken from the Egyptian Journal of Neuropsychiatry Neurosurgery journal, depicting the presentation of APS with nausea and vomiting in 70% of the patient in this journal. The second, with nausea, vomiting and hiccup, it is seen in 30% of the patient, and the presentation of isolated APS is seen in 35% of the patient, as was our case. The core symptom of NMOSD, which is acute myelitis, this one, it was seen in their journal in 100% of the cases, but in our patient this was absent. So again, making our case a rare entity. So there are few more journals depicting the same. This is from the Neurology Journal, depicting about, highlighting us about the diagnostic dilemmas, clinical features and outcome. This is again, second one is from Neurology Journal. This is telling us about the if we want to diagnose APS in MRI finding, a diagnosis of APS attack earlier than 48 hours is possible if a dorsal medullary lesion is detected. There are few more journals depicting the same. This is from the Egyptian Journal of Neurology, Psychiatry and Neurosurgery, which is giving us APS as a subset of NMOSD, which can occur in both in AQP4 positive antibody and also in AQP4 negative patients. This is from Oxford Journal. This is from Indian Medical Journal of Medical Sciences. This is a case report of 21-year-old female with intractable hiccups, nausea and vomiting, which was diagnosed with APS subset of NMOSD. This is quite the same case which we had. There are few more journals. These are journals from Medical Journal BMJ and Curious Journal of Medical Sciences. These both journals basically tell us about the treatment part in NMOSD guidelines. So for next, I would like to call Dr. Mukesh Sharma sir to tell about why this case was unique. and how the patient is right now. Thank you.
Good morning, respected teachers, seniors, and dear colleague and students. So the whole purpose of taking this patient to CCR is that this was a kind of unique case, as we saw the NMOSD with the paraplegia, paraparesis, corticostesis with some sort of neurological involvement, with bladder involvement and all. A patient presenting only with recurrent vomitings and hiccups, and not because of the common causes and because of some rare causes, that too a rare presentation of rare disease. So this case was unique, as NMOSD, that is neuromyelitis optica spectrum disorder, that is the prevalence of NMOSD in India is around 2.6 per lakh, and only less than 1 per 1 lakh is APS, that is area post-tenose syndrome. And in NMOSD, the usual presentation is with optic neuritis and longitudinally extensive transverse myelitis, which was absent in our case. And then APS variant of NMOSD, in which patient presents with only nausea, vomiting, and hiccups, is a very rare presentation of NMOSD. And the median age of the NMOSD is usually the middle age, but our patient was 17 years old. So there are a few learning points also, that NMOSD usually present with myelitis and optic neuritis, that is with some neurological deficits, but may present atypically, uncommonly as isolated APS with nausea, vomiting, and hiccups. So that requires a proactive approach with high degree of suspicion to catch the disease early for timely treatment, to avoid the serious complications which later patient's brainstem can be involved, respiratory center can get involved, and patient can die. The prompt treatment with steroids followed by the maintenance therapy with rituximab-like drugs can reduce the severe neurological morbidity and mortality of this disorder. And the key take-home message from our case is that initial differential diagnosis should always be broad, so to include the rare conditions also, and multidisciplinary approach is always the best. So this was the pic of the patient when he was in ICU. As you can see that the tray is there, and he was continuously having vomiting, retching, and hiccups. And luckily, this was the pic when he visited us after 15 days of his discharge. And patient is in regular follow-up and currently on the tapering dose of prednisolone. And he visited only 4 days back to my OPD, and currently he is asymptomatic and there is no new complaint. So the only way to do the great work is to love what you do, as a master Steve Jobs officer. Thank you. So I'd like to thank respected Raman Sankar sir, Vikasji sir, Sudhir Dev sir, GN Saxena sir, Swati ma'am, R.C. Gupta sir, and members of CCR core committee from bottom of my heart. And thanks to all the departments, their heads, nursing staff, and all the patients to give us the platform to work the art of medicine. Thank you very much.
Excellent presentation.
See the development of new symptoms, और अगर जरूरत होती है तो उसको रिटुक्सीमैब, अभी तो ये प्लान है कि 6 months के बाद में रिपीट किया जाएगा steroid and rituximab to prevent the lapse of rituximab. Rituximab repeat of rituximab to be given at the first dose, then after 15 days, and then after 6 months, and then we have to see the patient's progress. Plasmapheresis is for acute treatment, sir. The role of plasmapheresis is there with steroids, but we use this IVIG and patient responds. So that is not the literature says that is not for to prevent the relapse. That is for the acute treatment. If patient develops again all these symptoms, then plasma exchange can be used.
That is the area posterior. Thank you, sir.
The single patient, you presented patient had hiccup during sleep.
Yeah.
Patient had hiccup during sleep. But apart from there is and then you added antipsychotic like mencomb still form in the presence of continuous vomiting. Continuous vomiting. So why antipsychotic drug added?
Yeah. So actually,
antipsychotic drug in presence of different vomiting may lead to that.
Yes. The neurological cause, when it is causing vomiting hiccups, we can differentiate it with 2 points. One is vomitings if they are projectile, and if the hiccups are present during the sleep. You are right. But as this patient presented to us with a short history of only few days, 2 months back, this patient was going to the exams, and initially during the 3rd day, as this patient had upper GI endoscopy finding of outside upper GI endoscopy finding of enteral gastritis, we took, actually as I told, that we should consider all the possibilities. Then only you can come to a conclusion. If we have to keep, because cyclic vomiting syndrome is one which can cause vomiting and hiccups.
Sir, giving sedative with the vomiting is basically right.
We stopped and
I think from a physician perspective, I think what the medicine department did is absolutely acceptable. 17-18-year-old patient with the recurrent hiccups and on and off vomiting. I would have absolutely maybe Saxena Sahib is the senior most physician. I would have absolutely no issues with giving that patient anti-anxiety treatment. And major psychosis was not treated. It was just anxiety treatment.
Never had hiccup during sleep.
But we stopped those medicines when patient developed ulcers and neurological problems. The MRI was available to us.
Well, I think so far the discussion has been very good, and this is exactly how in a tertiary care center the patient should be treated, because he has the luxury of time and the availability of resources to investigate all possible causes. And has faith in you, all right. But if you are in a very, resource deficient area, suppose you have no finance and no access to Mahatma Gandhi Hospital, then probably only an MRI and things could have been done. So the approach is different from a tertiary care center, but this, how it was managed, was absolutely fine.
Thank you, sir. Sorry, sir.